So now the most interesting part of the event, that is the audience interaction. Before we go ahead with all the audience queries, I'm sure many of you are brewing with queries inside you. So let's, I have a couple of them for the two gentlemen who spoke here. First to Prateek, because you did speak about how, the US markets would sort of outperform from here on. And we have seen in 2010 itself, it was only the FII investment into our market that took it about 15 to 18% higher. Now, if that FII investment stops, which is the expectation, if it stops, then what will the movement of the equity market be? Will we continue to see a degrowth? Now, the reason I ask this is because, like you spoke about, bank deposits currently are at about 8 to 8.25% or so. If the market moves lower than, if the return on investment is better in terms of bank deposits, why don't I just put my money there and not put my money in equity markets purely for 2011?
15 kind of a number is my base case, and yes, it will be volatile. So for people, people can easily measure their own thing. They want 15% volatile returns, maybe equities. Otherwise, in this kind of a year, actually some of the companies offer returns which are in excess of 11-12%, and they are definitely less volatile probably at this point in time versus equity returns. So this is a pretty challenging year that way for Indian equities, for Indians to make an allocation. Maybe for an international investor which does not have the same luxury of higher interest rates, it is still attractive. So as far as we go, our base case is not that we will not get net positive FII flows. We believe we will get net positive FII flows, but maybe less than what happened last year.
Okay, and before we take the questions, one final question for you, Harsh. You spoke about SIPs and how you should be systematically investing your plan. How do you as a planner decide what is the amount of SIPs one should invest? I mean, you must be dealing with a whole big range of age brackets, 18 to 25, 25 to 30, etc. What are a couple of things that you take into consideration? And if you can give us some examples, if I am a 25-year-old, how much should I be investing? As a 40-year-old, how much should he be investing per month? Depending on his salary, of course.
So I think basically two things go into, asset allocation. I think all investment ultimately is about asset allocation, especially if you're doing it regularly, right? So I think two things. One is how far is your goal, right? So if your goal is 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now, then obviously you can afford to take much larger risks, and therefore your allocation for equity, and I'm restricting it to equity and debt, fixed income, simply because I think real estate, possibly gold is a 5% asset allocation that every household in India should do. But other than that, all other asset classes we are keeping out because that's really meant for, say, HNI individuals. So one, as I said, is how long is your goal? Longer the goal, higher. So anything about 10 years, okay, the equity allocation becomes very, very high. Second is the risk profile of the individual, right? I think the individuals have a certain, so if the individual is of the type that is going to stop his SIP when the market tanks, right, then you possibly don't want, and there are now questionnaires that have been developed that allow you to be able to find out whether your investor is of that type. But essentially, we try and counsel the investor to say, ki, if your goal is long term, please invest in equity.
Okay, great. So let's quickly open the forum.
With due regard, why insurance companies not promoting term insurance and they are running after ULIP?
Okay, I think that's an excellent question. I think just so that everybody knows, term insurance is pure insurance. Very low premium. If you die, your family gets the money. If you survive, nobody gets anything. I mean, it's like car insurance, right? And you hope to God you don't have to use it, right? It is very cheap, as he said. But I think there is a mistaken notion. Companies are promoting. Please go online search.
Everybody shouting on the top of their voices that in the upcoming monetary policy on 25th, there will be hike of 0.25 to 0.5%. Previous year also same steps were taken by RBI. So do you think it's apt steps taken by RBI at the cost of growth? अगर यही चलता रहा तो हम लोग की निफ्टी की ट्रेन रुक जाएगी.
Growth is good, but growth that ultimately causes inflation to shoot up is probably not good. Because at the end of the day, inflation has to be seen as probably the biggest tax that you and me have to pay. And what inflation actually tells you is that there is not so much of capacity in the system. Okay, so what is inflation? You know, people are bidding up a price of a commodity higher because it is less than what people demand. So in that case, one of the policy response is to tighten monetary policy so that people have less money to spend and people buy less, so that things cool a bit. But you are right, it is not a sustainable kind of a response, because in a country where people have next to nothing and have huge ambitions to acquire at least something, growth is something that cannot be foregone for too long. And hence we believe every policy maker keeps that in mind. They tighten but make sure that growth does not get impacted.
अभी मेरी एज काफ़ी कम है, तो सर अपने मैं पैसे को कहाँ इन्वेस्ट कर सकता हूँ? सर ने कहा जैसे ETF फंड में, या आपने कहा जैसे म्यूचुअल फंड में, या इक्विटी मार्केट में. कुड यू सजेस्ट मी अ बेटर आइडिया सर?
इसमें दो चीज़ें हैं. सबसे पहले आपका करंट खर्चा कितना है, क्योंकि रिटायरमेंट का उद्देश्य ये होता है कि जब आप रिटायर हो तो आपकी जो स्टैंडर्ड ऑफ लिविंग है वो सेम रहे. तो बहुत ज़्यादा पैसा आपको जमा करना पड़ेगा. तो दो फेजेस होंगे. पहला अक्यूमुलेशन फेज है जो आप 60 तक करेंगे, और बाद में उसमें अलग रणनीति अपनाएंगे कि क्या करना चाहिए. तो पहले फेज में ऑब्वियसली सिर्फ आपके पास इतनी टाइम है, चूंकि आप इतने यंग हैं, तो आपको इक्विटीज में ज़्यादा ध्यान देना चाहिए. आप चाहे तो 5% गोल्ड में दे सकते हैं, asset class. Baki, I would advise 95% equity, and as I said, regular systematic investment plan. Sign that SIP and forget about it. Right? That is one piece of advice. The second piece of advice is, जब आप पैसा जमा कर रहे हैं उस समय ये जरूरी नहीं है कि आप ऐसे प्लान में जमा करें जिस प्लान के नाम में पेंशन लिखा हो. आपको पैसा जमा करना, पैसा है, चाहे वो पेंशन प्लान में हो चाहे और कोई प्लान में हो.
Well, as you can see, that was a slew of informed investors quizzing our financial experts quite hard on how to make their money grow for them in 2011. Lots of sectors were spoken about, lots of avenues as well. The hot favorite of the day was gold ETFs and how to trade in that one. But that apart, banks, IT, infrastructure, all of that was discussed. All in all, I had a great time. I hope you did too. And until we meet again in another city, invest wisely.